This video is brought to you by the movie Greenland. They sent me 5 copies to give away. You go to the Strong Opinion Sports Instagram account, find and comment on the post about the movie Greenland. In your comment, tag the movie Greenland and tag someone you want to watch it with, and I will pick the 5 winners from there. I predicted that the Pittsburgh Steelers would go 11-5 in 2020. I got pretty close. They went 12-4. And my biggest reason for believing in Pittsburgh is that they nearly made the playoffs 2 years ago in 2019 with a bunch of backup quarterbacks, Devlin Hodges and Mason Rudolph. Big Ben got hurt, was out for the year. And with backup quarterbacks, they almost made the playoffs. So going into 2020, I was like, man, they're getting a future Hall of Fame quarterback, Big Ben, back from injury. They got a great defense. They've got a ton of offensive weapons. James Washington, Juju Smith-Schuster, Eric Ebron, James Conner, Benny Snell, Raver McLeod. We saw Chase Claypool break out. We saw Diontae Johnson break out. I'm like, man, this is a really good roster with a Hall of Fame quarterback and maybe the best defense in the NFL. How do you not look at Pittsburgh and go, they're definitely a playoff team, maybe even a Super Bowl team? And the Steelers peaked early. They played great football in September and October. We'll talk about they had a bunch of drops later in the year. I don't know if that's because of cold weather. I don't know what happened. But they started 11-0. And at 11-0, I looked at Pittsburgh and went, guys, this is a Super Bowl team. How can you not buy into the Steelers? And some people hated on them and didn't buy into them. But I don't know how you don't look at Pittsburgh. They played great football the first 11 weeks of the year. And in the second half of the year, injuries piled up. There were 2 key injuries. Linebackers Devin Bush and Bud Dupree that really hurt their defense. They went from, I think, the best defense arguably in the NFL to a pretty good defense, but definitely not the same they once were. They were not as dominant as they were early on in the year. And then as the year went on, again, I talked about it earlier, drops became a really big problem for this team. The Steelers receivers really, really struggled to hold on to the football. And there's not a ton to say here other than that Pittsburgh just fell apart. It was very disappointing. I mean, Big Ben regressed. He went from a guy, Big Ben's arm did not look the same all year. He had to get the ball out very quickly. It was a short, quick, intermediate passing game, trying to get the ball out of his hands very quickly, which it worked for Big Ben. He was very efficient, but when he needed to really make big plays downfield, it looked like he was unable to. And the Steelers went on to lose 5 of their last 6 games. It was not a good end of the season for Pittsburgh. And it really all led to a very, very embarrassing playoff game where the Steelers lost to the Browns 48-37. Big Ben had 4 interceptions. The Steelers had a total of 5 turnovers. The Browns, in fact, led 28-0 at one point. It was so disheartening for a team that started so well to fall so far at the end of the year. Now they lost to Buffalo and Washington, 2 playoff teams. They also lost to Cleveland, but that was in a game where they didn't play their starters. And after the 2020 season, kind of the main question around Pittsburgh is, what do they do at the quarterback position? I got a ton of questions about this on Patreon. I'm not going to read them all, but I want to shout out to Logan, Verkos, Aiden, Holden, a couple other people. A lot of people wrote in with questions about what does Pittsburgh need to do at quarterback moving forward? Is Big Ben the guy? Should Big Ben be their quarterback next year? What about Dwayne Haskins? Should they draft another quarterback? What should the Steelers do at quarterback next year? So I want to tell you, I would draft a quarterback in the first round, but it's tough because you can't force it. If there's a guy that you're not quite sure about, you can't just Christian Ponder. Remember, Christian Ponder was, the Vikings needed a quarterback very badly. They wanted Christian Ponder to be the guy. He really quite wasn't the guy, but they forced it. They drafted him. They overdrafted him, and he did not turn out to be their franchise quarterback. So you can't overdraft somebody just because you want to justify drafting a quarterback in the first round. And really the biggest problem is, if Big Ben should not be the Steelers quarterback next year, then who should be? Who should be the guy next year in Pittsburgh? Because unfortunately, there isn't a better option. You probably can't trade for Deshaun Watson. I do not trust Dwayne Haskins. He's been in the league 2 years. He did very badly in Washington. When he played, he was awful. He had problems off the field. Pittsburgh's going to give Dwayne Haskins a tryout next year. He'll get all of 2021, probably, likely, if he minds his P's and Q's to try out, and they'll see if he can be the guy long term. And the Steelers could draft a quarterback in the first round, but they have the 24th overall pick. That's not exactly the best pick in the draft for drafting a quarterback. I would imagine that all the good quarterbacks are going to be gone by then. I don't think Mac Jones is going to fall that far. And I don't like Kyle Trask, the former Florida quarterback. I don't like him a lot anyway, but definitely not in Pittsburgh, where he's got a okay to average arm and he's got to push the ball vertically in cold weather. I don't think Kyle Trask is right necessarily in Pittsburgh. Maybe they draft Kellen Mond out of Texas A&M in the second round. But basically, Big Ben has to be the quarterback next year in 2021 because there isn't another option. Like, if you can come up with a better plan of what to do at quarterback for Pittsburgh, I'm all ears, but I just don't think there's anything else left. I mean, Carson Wentz got traded away. They're not gonna maybe they make a move for Marcus Mariota? ? I don't know. Is that really better than Big Ben? I don't even know that. So, I just people are like, well, the Steelers need a new quarterback. Yeah, but what's your plan? Because they're not getting Matthew Stafford. He got traded. They're not getting every quarterback's been moved now. And I don't know. They're going to have to move up in the draft, I guess, to get somebody if they really want a long-term first-round quarterback to replace Big Ben. Now, one final thing. I was very, very disappointed with the, for lack of a better term, the story arc of Diontae Johnson, the Steelers receiver last year. He had such a strong start early on. I had him on the watch list for I do my SOS awards for 2020. And I had him on my watch list for like the breakout star of the year award. I'm like, oh, this guy. Third-year player, kind of coming out of nowhere, doing great this year. But then he started dropping passes, and it became this really awful, really disappointing story where Diontae Johnson early on was awesome, and as the year went on, just drop and drop. I don't know if he got the yips. I don't know what happened, but Diontae Johnson went from an exciting young player to a guy that I just was very, very disappointed in later on in the year. With the amount of drops he had underneath on crossing routes was just unacceptable. And I wanted to share that. I went like, Diontae Johnson was such a heartwarming story early on, who became really a frustrating and disappointing story later on as the year continued and they made it into the playoffs.